Welcome everyone to the very first edition of the Fantasy Insiders College Football Show. This was the first show actually that I did with Fantasy Insiders last year. Ben, David, and I did it, and it was a lot of fun. It was really the first thing that we did sort of together as a group, and we're back. We have Ben, we have David watching us. He's not really here, and my friend Jordan Case, who's like 8 feet away from me over in his room, because I couldn't figure out the mixing board that David sent. And we're here with you for the next hour to break down tomorrow's early and late slate on FanDuel, DraftKings, FantasyElite, and Draft Day. And it's a show with Ben Pritchett, which means that we're going to have so many hot takes, and Jordan's full of hot takes, and I have some unpopular opinions. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. Ben, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm ready to get this thing started, dude. It's been a long baseball season, and you know how excited we get when the pigskin starts getting thrown around a little bit. So I'm ready, man. It's going to be good times.
Yep. Jordan and I played today. Have a pretty sick lineup using his midweek write-up plays, but these slates were pretty easy. There were obvious plays at quarterback both days. Holiday yesterday, Taysom Hill today. There were a lot of top wide receivers from last year returning. So there was a lot of straightforward plays, but tomorrow is where having the news informational advantage is going to be really big, because there's a ton of teams that have new players. They have stars who graduated, and all these teams are a lot different. What is your favorite play of all tomorrow, Ben?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious who the favorite play is. He was a cover boy of the article. It's going to be Rakeem Cato. We saw last year what this guy can do into a defense that's bad, and he just puts up touchdowns. He puts up a ton of yards. And this whole offense rolls through him. So he's an easy play. It's an easy choice for who the top play of the early slate, of the late slate. Whatever you're doing, Rakeem Cato's the guy.
Yeah, he definitely is. And what's awesome about him is that he has a wide receiver that he throws to all of the time. Tommy Schuler, he's not an NFL prospect. He's probably not going to go on to be very much, but he is just a target hog. He just gets the ball all game long. And something that's cool about Cato, didn't they start a website as a campaign for him to win the Heisman, Ben?
They started a website for a campaign to win the Heisman for everybody. I wouldn't be surprised if Blake Bell has a Heisman website somewhere.
Well, that would be completely rational.
Yeah. I mean, you probably started it, right, Davis?
Yeah, I'm a huge Blake Bell fan, obviously.
The Belldozer?
The Belldozer. Jordan, who's your favorite overall play tomorrow?
I think I'm with Ben on the whole Rakeem Cato thing. I really like a lot of guys from the UAB and Troy game, like Jamarcus Nelson, for example. Looks like he might have a huge game.
Ben, give me your Jamarcus Nelson hot take.
I mean, yeah, he's their main wide receiver. It's a really smart play to get as much exposure to this game as you possibly can. Because if I'm not mistaken, of the listed totals, because Vegas doesn't do the totals for the FCS FBS games, but where you can get a total for the normal FBS versus FBS teams, I think the UAB Troy game is the top. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Do you know that, Jordan?
It's at 63 right now.
63. Okay, I want to say I saw a 66. Maybe that was the Tulsa game, not Tulsa.
New Mexico.
New Mexico, yeah, New Mexico, UTEP.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just start out looking at DraftKings salaries. We'll sort of go by position. So on DraftKings, the Marshall game is not in there, so you're not going to have a chance to roster Rakeem Cato. Would you use Sean Mannion or Brett Hundley, Ben?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, when you're dealing with DraftKings and you're dealing with these FCS opponents, you really have to factor in how close you think the games are going to be. And if you read my article, I tried to focus any attacks I did on the FCS teams were FCS teams that I think are pretty good. And with Portland State, they're kind of one of those close to being not very good, not even pretty good. But I don't think Oregon State is very good. And so I think that this is one of those where they'll stay close because of that. Or close enough. I mean, it could be a 5-touchdown, 6-touchdown blowout and be close enough for Sean Mannion to throw for 450 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns. So Mannion is my guy. I like Hundley, but it's just one of those where he's playing on the road in Virginia. Virginia's defense is a lot better this year than it was last year. I think they returned a lot of starters. It's just not going to be the ideal matchup. It's just not one you want to attack.
One of their top secondary guys is out for tomorrow's game, though. I'm not sure who it is. Are you worried at all about Brandon Cooks not being there anymore, Jordan? I know that a lot of his passing yardage was to Brandon Cooks. Is that something that concerns you at all about Mannion?
A little bit, but I know they're still going to throw the ball a ton. And who's going to get all the extra targets? Is it going to be Hamlet or Mulaney?
Well, it's gonna be spread around. I think you gotta factor in Hamlet's going to be a very, very important part. He's the tight end. He's going to be rostered like crazy. I don't see anybody fading him very much. But yeah, he's a big part. Mulaney's a big part. I've been hearing Victor Bolden's going to be the guy that takes over the Brandon Cooks role. He's not Brandon Cooks, and Davis will remember this. He doesn't have the catch radius.
Dude, I mean, Brandon Cooks is a little guy, but he has an insane catch radius. He really does. Yeah, he can go up there and get it. So just assuming you take, sort of one of those higher options, I think. What do you think about Devin Gardner versus Appalachian State? Do you think he stays in the game in the first half long enough, Jordan?
Yeah, I think so. I liked Ben's hot take that he wrote up in the article, saying that Michigan hasn't forgot about the beating they took a couple years ago.
Yeah, I was wondering how Ben would handle that because they came into Michigan and beat them, ruined their season for all intents and purposes.
You're talking about, I think I wrote that he has a chip the size of the big house. He does on his shoulders. Devin Gardner does, because Devin Gardner was a disappointment last year, and because Appalachian State beat Michigan in that epic 2007 opening weekend. And that just goes to the next point. If you've watched these games from the midweek on, how unpredictable. I mean, there's been the obvious plays in daily fantasy, but for the overall, how unpredictable has it been? I mean, we just saw tonight with Western Kentucky, Doty threw 560, 90 yards, I don't know, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, nobody saw that coming against Bowling Green. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of flex as we kind of figure out who's legit and who's not legit. And I remember the first week of last year was a rough week for me, and then it got a lot better as the weeks went along, because you kind of have to feel out whose defense is real and whose defense is bad and what offenses are going to do things like that. So
it was not rough for me last year because I had Cato, Schuler, I had Hundley. It was great, man.
Yeah, you did the 3-way stack too. I think you got Gator Hoskins there too. Who's a guy we probably won't touch on. Him missing for Rakeem Cato is a big deal because Cato threw a lot of touchdown passes to that dude, and they've got a new tight end who I don't know if we'll get into a little bit, but he's going to be taking over that role. But again, another guy that I don't know if can really step into the shoes, just like we don't know if Victor Bolden can really take over the Brandon Cook shoes. I don't know if Eric Frohnapfel can take over the shoes of Gator Hoskins.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either.
I think that's going to be a little more of a Tommy Schuler type thing, just all the targets for him.
See, and I'm sort of leaning that way too. Going back down here a little bit farther, looking at Maryland, C.J. Brown last year in cushy matchups was a really good fantasy producer. What is Vegas telling you about this game? This is another one of those weird games. They're playing against James Madison, which is, if you know anything about that school, you would know how hilarious it is that they have a football team, because
they're good.
Are they?
Yeah, they're ranked. Hold on, I'll pull it up. They're ranked. They're ranked preseason top 25 FCS.
Okay.
So
Maryland is only favored by 21 points in that one too.
Yeah, again, another reason why you see C.J. Brown. Hold on, I'm looking at it. Yeah, they're ranked 22nd on Athlon Sports.
Okay.
So and Vegas agrees, like Jordan said, that 22 points is a pretty close spread. So you're gonna see some C.J. Brown getting enough run, I would assume, to where he can put up some serious points.
Is Stephon Diggs back active for them, or is he still out with injury?
He had to work his way back up the depth chart. He started off. They put him at the number 1. I think he had a bad spring and summer. They put him back to number 2. He worked his butt off, got back to number 1. I mean, there's no, you're an NFL prospect. You know how to catch a ball. He's going to be very, very successful. And if we kind of got shortchanged last year that we didn't get to really experience him like we all hoped, but he'll be back. If he's healthy, he's going to just run crazy this year.
All right, Ben, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you rather pay the $7,200 on DraftKings for Devin Gardner or the $6,400 for CJ Brown?
$6,400 for CJ Brown, not even a question.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And the reason for that is, while Devin Gardner can run a little bit, he doesn't have the legs of CJ Brown. And while Devin Gardner might put up a little bit more yardage, he's not. He's also very, very turnover prone. And so there's always that risk where he could go and not get a lot of rushing yards and throw a couple interceptions. And I know what I'm getting with CJ Brown. I know I'm getting a guy with some stacked wide receivers, and he's just going to go. He's just going to have a good game. And at that price point, you're saving yourself some money to go get somebody else. Yeah, it's just a no-brainer for me.
All right. With Brandon Connett gone, do you have any love for Anthony Boone tomorrow, Jordan?
Yeah, I think I do. Mostly because of Jamison Crowder, because he's like the next Brandon Cooks. But, I know nothing about Elon, so I don't really know what that matchup's going to bring. But Duke's like a 40-point favorite. And
this is one of those scarier ones. If you dabble with Duke, you could get all your points in a half. That's the one where you're really you're putting your toes into the water. If you're really risking some there. But I'm not saying it's not going to be a good play, and it could be a great play. It's just Elon, you're dealing with a team that could just get smashed.
I mean, just looking at wide receiver prices, though, I mean, Jamison Crowder for $6,600 on DraftKings seems like a very good deal. Like, even in a half, like, he's so much a part of their offense. And with Connett gone, a lot of he took a lot of the short rushing touchdowns, but with him as more of a red zone option, I kind of like that price tag against Elon.
Mm-hmm. It's a good price. I mean, he's in my mock-up of I made 2 rough draft lineups. He's in my mock-up, so.
He's just got the huge playability. He can break open any play at any time.
These
70-yard touchdown.
These prices on DraftKings seem very soft this week. Is that something you noticed while you were writing these guys up, Ben?
Oh yeah, it's very soft. And when you're doing it the way I did it this year, last year I just did one site and focused solely on that site, and I felt like it had a lot of benefits. But now that we're getting more popular and we become premium, I'm trying to mix 2 at the same time of doing DraftKings and FanDuel, and there's a lot of, especially this week, we're dealing with a whole different slate on DraftKings. I mean, because they do all the FCS games, and you have these cheaper prices, and then FanDuel treats players differently than DraftKings does. And so, yeah, it's definitely softer. I think I would almost say it's a little bit top-heavy. So, like, some players have, like, huge salaries, and then it just dies off on DraftKings. So there are going to be some guys that you're going to have to pay for.
Who, just right now, because we'll start talking about running backs, and we're going to have to go more in depth, but just real quick before we go to running backs, who are some of the studs who you feel comfortable rostering tomorrow, Ben?
On which slate?
On the earlier late slate on DraftKings.
I like Tevin Coleman. Indiana running back. He's a hoss. When Stephen Houston was there and he had to share carries, it was always a bummer for me because I am attracted to skill, as I know you are too, Davis. That's why we tend to butt heads a little bit and we get really into our absolutes. Is that Tevin Coleman has a lot of skill. And he's going up against Indiana State, who has been good in the past. But if they let just Tevin Coleman go crazy, he gets 20-plus carries, dude's going to have a phenomenal line. 100-plus yards, couple touchdowns, he's going to have a game.
Okay.
So he's definitely one.
All right, Jordan, just real quick before we start talking about running backs, just like one stud who you totally are comfortable paying up for tomorrow.
I don't know if you call him a stud necessarily, but Josh Ferguson is in a really nice spot. The line on that game is only 9 points. We don't have an over-under because it's the FCS team with Youngstown State. But he catches passes. He runs the ball. I think Ben wrote him up, if I'm correct. And he's not the top tier talent that you're looking for, but he's going to get the opportunity, which is...
Yeah, I agree with him. He catches balls too. So that's always important on a 1-point PPR like DraftKings is.
Yeah,
he could easily go for 7+ catches.
Yeah, real quick question in the chat. Anyone on Everett Golson tomorrow? Jordan, I think you put him down in the cheat sheets, right?
I believe so, yeah. If I didn't, I meant to.
Golson, you about that life, Ben?
I'm not about the Notre Dame life, period. But if I was, Golson would be the guy. You're dealing with a guy who missed all of last year. I mean, he could have a great game, yeah, sure, but there's still a little bit of hesitation I'm going to have.
That's fair.
Okay,
all
right.
But that's not meaning he's not going to do well. There's hesitation.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different quarterbacks that I would use in that slate specifically, that early slate on DraftKings. I don't know. He seems like an unnecessary risk type play. Would you agree,
Definitely.
Ben?
Definitely. That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's fair.
Okay, cool. Well, let's move on to running back. We'll look at the early slate and then the late slate, and we can, the best we can, we'll try and address both DraftKings and FanDuel. Just so everyone knows, once we're past week 3, the slates aren't going to differ that much between the sites because all these cupcake opponents are going to be gone, and they'll be conference plays, so the same games will be included on several slates. They're just starting out on this early slate. Who's your top running back in this early slate, Ben?
For DraftKings already gave it. It's Tevin Coleman.
Okay.
But you can't use him on FanDuel.
Yeah, so on FanDuel. Gurley or Abdullah?
There's Ezekiel Elliott.
Gonna be a homer pick.
For Ohio State against Navy. That's good. That's probably going to be my play. I like Todd Gurley and I like Abdullah, but I would rather save a little bit of money and go with Elliott, I think.
It's really hard to make a FanDuel lineup work that I really like with Abdullah, who I would take him over Gurley, but it's really hard to make it work. It works a lot better with Ezekiel Elliott. What's your hot take on him? Is he good, Ben? I mean, he hardly got any run last year, correct?
Yeah, the guy I was hoping would get the job is Rod Smith, who is kind of more of for Ohio State, he's kind of more of the Carlos Hyde type back. And so I was secretly rooting for that, and that still might happen, but Elliott has the job. There's none of this either or depth chart we're looking at. It's Elliott's job. And so they've been very forthcoming with that, and I can appreciate that. As someone who has to write these guys up, I can definitely appreciate that. So, Elliott, I wrote everything I know about him, 8.2 yards per carry in limited work. They're not going to have Braxton Miller, so you're going to be dealing with a J.T. Barrett as the quarterback. They're going to try to keep things simple. You know they are. J.T. Barrett was a dual threat guy, so there might be some rushing yardage he could take away, but so was Braxton Miller, and Braxton Miller never hurt Carlos Hyde last year. So there's a lot to like about Elliott as they face a Navy team that's not known for its defense.
Yeah. So choose out of those three guys, including Price, Ezekiel Elliott, Abdullah, or Gurley? Jordan.
Oh, okay.
That's tough. I would probably, with Price, I would have to go Elliott. But if you got the money, I would play Abdullah.
Okay. We got a question about Trayvon Green, the running back for I believe Northwestern.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's nice about him is that he was in a timeshare of all of last year, and I think when the pricing was done, he was expected to be in a timeshare. But Venrick Mark is not on the team anymore, so he sets up to be in a pretty good spot. Is he good, Ben? Does he run with ants in his pants? I don't know. I don't know scouting terms, man.
Well, if you just take a look and go look at his game logs from last year, I mean, he had some games where he rushed for like nothing on 20 carries, and he had a couple big games. I think I'm looking at it right now. He had a 3-touchdown, 49-yard game against Nebraska in Lincoln, so that's good. Had a 2-touchdown game, 158 yards against Western Michigan against this same Cal team who we know's defense was awful last year. He put up 129 and 2 touchdowns. So if you take Venrick Mark out of the equation and they actually run the ball with Trayvon Green, he's a good play if you want to work him in. I'm not
Okay.
going to do it. I'm not going to do it, but he is a good play. Definitely a good play.
Are you? I think Jordan and I both have Trayvon Green in our lineups right now. Is that correct, Jordan?
I like him a lot.
Just at this stage, I think wide receivers are a little like down the depth chart. Wide receivers are a little bit harder to predict. So finding a cheap wide receiver who's going to do really well is sort of hard. So I actually kind of like the philosophy this early on in the season of spending on wide receiver and finding a cheap running back who has basically all of the work to himself. I really like that this early on in the season in terms of lineup construction.
I just pulled up his salary. Would you rather have him? He's $300 more than Storm Woods against Portland State.
I mean, Storm Woods is like a lot of what he does is like pass catching, right? But like, how much are they going to have to do that?
Well, you got to realize we just talked about they have to find new targets. They're going to throw the ball.
Yeah, but of course they're going to throw the ball, but he's not going to replace Brandon Cooks.
Of course he's not, but you add some targets and some plays that where they would have gone to Cooks, they're now going to Storm Woods. Just saying.
Doesn't Teron Ward also catch passes out of the backfield there too?
Yeah, they got Woods as the primary back, and they have him as everything I've read was, he's stronger, he's faster, he's going to try to run in between the tackles better. All those typical things you hear in the offseason. His game logs aren't much better than Trayvon Green, so that's why I was curious. The competition may be a little bit easier for Storm Woods.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, a lot of this, I mean, if we're going to be realistic, a lot of this comes down to, early, because their opportunities are sort of going to be cut in half just because of the way these games are working with these huge point spreads. So it just comes down to, on his long run in the first half when he gets out in the open, does the safety catch him or not? Mm-hmm. And that sounds weird, but like that really is sort of how these early games of college football go. I do know from your write-up, though, that you have an extremely scalding hot take on O.J. Howard. Is that his first name?
No, it's Jordan Howard. O.J. Howard's the tight end from Alabama.
Yeah.
Who I had a lot of hot takes about last year, who's now everybody's darling boy this year. But, he was very disappointing last year, O.J. Howard was. Jordan Howard is one of those finds where when you pour over research and you're trying to look at all this stuff, names start bubbling to the top. We talked about this UAB Troy game having a huge total, and so I was trying to find ways to get guys into this rankings that were in that game, and it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done especially on the UTEP New Mexico game, because they finding out who New Mexico is going to run the ball with this year is so difficult. They had Casey Carrier last year; it was easy. It's not so easy with some of these smaller schools where there's not a lot of news coverage until we start seeing stats.
You gotta go what I did with Air Force last year, man. Interrogate, get on the forums and just follow the beat writers and bug the shit out of them until they tell you.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it was, where I was just kind of looking over, what he did last year as a true freshman, and he did really well. 6.1 yards per carry, 881 yards, kind of worked in with another back who's now gone. He had 100-yard games against Marshall, FIU, MTSU, all the stuff I wrote up. But we're dealing with a game where you're going to have a lot of a shootout. The UAB is going to score a lot. Troy's going to score a lot. Plenty of opportunities for Jordan Howard to get in there and be a big scorer, and he's only 5,200 on FanDuel.
All right. Well, that'll make that's a good stopping point for the early slate. So going over into this late slate, looking at running back, what's your take on the LSU running back situation, Jordan?
I don't know. I really don't want a whole lot from that because Wisconsin has a pretty solid defense. But I think, isn't Leonard Fournette pretty highly touted?
Yeah, but McGee was sort of the guy who ran at the goal line last year.
Yeah, so, that place is a mess.
You have to think that with the new quarterback, they're gonna want to run the ball a lot anyways.
But yeah. Jennings is also a running quarterback.
A running quarterback, true. Ben,
so he might even take some of those goal line carries away from either Fournette or McGee.
Okay. Ben, do you have a take on either one of those two?
Yeah, it's complicated backfield you're dealing with because we don't know how good Wisconsin's run defense, but it is this year. But it is notoriously good, and so you're taking a chance with any of the backfield of LSU. If you go with Fournette, that's fun. That's a fun play. We talk about all the time about going with a fun guy if you want to. He's 4,700, I believe, on FanDuel.
No, he is way more expensive than that.
Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, he's 5,800.
He's 5,800 on FanDuel. Maybe it was DraftKings I was looking at where he's 4,700. But either way, he's doable if you want to get him in. But really, you're just doing that because you want to play him. Is the matchup's not there? The opportunities are unknown. That's just strictly you wanting to watch college football and put in a gamble on the game.
Sub note for everyone who's doing this and sweating out baseball games right now. Every Washington National is hitting a home run. Just literally all of them. Okay, so Texas backfield. Malcolm Brown, Jonathan Gray. Who's the one that you like here? Because they kicked out the third guy in that backfield, so it's a lot easier to deal with in terms of workload. But Malcolm Brown Jonathan Gray is returning from a knee injury. So that makes me think that Malcolm Brown could be a real value in this FanDuel late slate for 7,000.
Yeah, they ran the ball a lot with Malcolm Brown. Like towards the end of last year, he was getting 25 carries. Even when Gray came back, he was still getting 20-plus carries a game. Mm-hmm. And you can blame part of that on David Ash being out with the concussion. You can blame part of that on Jonathan Gray being unhealthy. But Gray seems to be still dealing with some of those issues. I still see his name listed on injury depth charts. He's going to play. He's probably the better talent. He was a 5-star guy out of Texas when he was coming up. Jonathan Gray was a stud. Still is probably a really good back, but it's Malcolm Brown's show. So if you're going to own one, it's going to be Malcolm Brown. For some reason, Malcolm Brown's a big dude, but for some reason last year they were intent on giving Joe Bergeron the goal line carries. So that always affected Brown's, ending line. And going up against North Texas, I think that they're going to give him more of those goal line carries. But again, that's a little bit of speculation. They could give Jonathan Gray those carries.
Yeah. Jordan, talk a little bit about Cameron Artis-Payne, because he's someone's name, so I keep seeing his name come up, but I don't know much about him.
He is the running back for Auburn. They get the matchup with Arkansas, they haven't been good in several years. The very first thing when I first started looking at research for college football, that was the matchup that I liked the most. And I think it was in Phil Steele's magazine where he just dogged on the Arkansas defense this year already before he'd even before he even really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So I like Artis-Payne a lot. He's a little pricey, but I think it's worth it to fit him in there.
Is he in a timeshare at all? Because obviously his backfield mate from last year, Trey Mason, is a St. Louis Ram now. So you would have to think that sort of most of the backfield work is going to go to him.
I would think so. They have Corey Grant backing him up. I don't know a whole lot about him.
Yeah.
Corey Grant's more of the speed running back, but and Grant will get tons of play. It's Artis-Payne's job at the beginning, but they're going to be splitting carries. But Cameron Artis-Payne is a stud. He is so good. So that's going to be one where you're going to have to see how much Nick Marshall's absence, it's a risk, but if Nick Marshall kind of fades into the second half, doesn't come in until the second half, you're going to see a lot of running from Auburn, I think. But
yeah, what do you think because I don't know what they're going to do there. What do you think? Because if Nick Marshall doesn't play, you have to think Sammy Coates is sort of like you can't use him basically. So what do you think they do with Nick Marshall?
Well, see, they aren't saying anything except that he's not starting, and they're saying he will play. I even think I saw one place where he said that he will play early. Maybe that was Mike Davis. Some of this stuff starts merging together.
Dude, don't bring up. It's too soon. Mike Davis.
Too soon. But yeah, it's one of those things where you really don't know what you're going to get playing time out of Nick Marshall, which means you can't use him, and you can't use the other quarterback who I can't think of his name at the right on. But he had some good games filling in. I was really excited to use him, but I'm not going to get to because of Nick Marshall. If Nick Marshall's not out of the game, I don't think this other guy's going to throw any less than Nick Marshall did. Nick Marshall barely threw last year. But they said that they spent all offseason trying to focus on throwing the ball more. They have some really good options with Coates, Lewis, and Williams, Daquell Williams, the top junior college transfer in the country.
Yeah. Okay. All of that works out. for me. Are there any sort of cheaper running backs that we're missing out on talking about?
I think we hit the ones that I like. If you go onto the late slate of running backs, there's a few guys. Darius Tice from South Florida is a minimum play. He's 3,100. I think their minimum's 3,000. So he could still run into a timeshare, but it's his job to start with. Western Carolina is not necessarily a great FCS team, but neither USF is an embarrassing FBS team. So they should work well together. I really like Dwayne Washington, who looks like he's taken over the job for Washington in Hawaii. If you paid attention to any of the college football news and Twitter, they've all come out and talking about this Hawaii program may be disbanded. They're trying to do all these things to change back the uniforms to the old Rainbow Warriors and trying to revive people's enthusiasm for the program because they're not making any money. They're working on a deficit. That team is just a hot mess. So I fully expect Washington, even without Siler Miles, who's not going to play, I fully expect Washington to steamroll them.
Do you not want to tout your homie Califani Muhammad?
Please don't.
Oh, Califani Muhammad. No, not yet. I need to see a little bit of that guy. Speedster, we know that. He could rip off 60-yard runs, but boy, man, when we used him last year, he'd just go 6 carries, 9 yards, and then they wouldn't use him for 3 games, and then he'd break off and have a 100-yard game. So it's just the way he works. Yep. It's too much risk.
All right. Well, now we get to talk about my favorite position. We're going to talk about wide receivers. There are a lot of interesting guys going in tomorrow's slate. I think some of the most interesting ones are in the Troy UAB game that you were talking about. Tell me a little bit about Jamarcus Nelson, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a ton about Jamarcus Nelson. I know that he is their focal point of their whole offense. So he's going to get touches. Where does he rank on FanDuel as far as price of all the other wide receivers? Because I think he's right up there at the top.
Up there.
Yeah, I think he's third most expensive in the early slate.
Okay, so if you're going to go that direction, you really got to be sold out to him. And I looked over his stats. He had some really good games towards the end of the last year, and he's a senior. He's only 5'11", 160. So he better be burning people with his legs. It's just one of those where I thought that there were some other higher price guys that should be ahead of him, even though Vegas thinks this game's going to have some points.
Okay, so who do you like ahead of him then?
On this slate, I like. Is he on the early slate or the late slate?
He's on the early slate.
Okay, so he's on the early slate. Schuler, definitely.
Oh well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tommy Schuler, listen to everyone listening to this show. If you do not start Tommy Schuler in your cash games tomorrow on FanDuel, when you lose, no one's gonna feel bad for you. Okay? That's he gets running back points every single week because he gets so many touches. All right. So other than Schuler,
yeah, Schuler, Amari Cooper, I think is a sneaky one. His price is pretty.
What do you see in him, man?
So here's where I see on this one. I think if you watched West Virginia last year, their pass defense, they will have had to have made a 2,000% chance or change on their whole squad if they expect to be able to handle Alabama. From what I heard, whoever the quarterback is going to be for Alabama, they're going to keep the game plan pretty simple and pound the ball. So that's kind of been more of what I've heard since I've written this article. So Amari Cooper is one of those where you're taking a little bit of a risk, but everything that I've been reading says that he is looking fabulous. He finished the year so strong, and we all hoped. It's kind of one of those plays where you keep going to that well, and hopefully it keeps paying off or will pay off eventually. Amari Cooper's that guy. And then the other two guys that I have in this higher price range are DK guys because they play FCS teams, and that's Tyler Boyd of Pittsburgh and Quinshaw Davis of UNC.
Okay, real quick, I'm gonna let you talk about Brian Holmes from Troy, Jordan here in a second. But is my boy Marquise Williams gonna start for UNC, Ben?
Gosh, I hate their coaching staff so much. If there was a worse, I spent probably 30 minutes to an hour trying to figure out is Marquise Williams going to start or not. and I couldn't figure it out. They have this Trubisky kid who's apparently better than Marquise Williams and has looked better, and so they've created this whole, is Marquise Williams the starter or not? He hasn't earned the job, and we're going to be silent about if he has it or not. They're doing the same thing with their running backs, because I wanted to write up TJ Logan, and I can't. The only guy that we know is definitely starting and is definitely the number one is Quinshaw Davis.
I think I'm going to run out of GPP with Marquise Williams.
You should.
He's so good, dude.
Yeah, you should.
It's hard for me to imagine him being replaced after how good he was last year.
It's a joke.
All right, Brian Holmes, because when you showed me this play, Jordan, the whole early slate sort of changed for me. It became a lot more playable. So talk a little bit about Brian Holmes.
Yeah, he's the wide receiver for Troy. Last year he caught 40 passes, 7 touchdowns, and that's being the second option behind Eric Thomas, who was not doing anything now. He was a really good college wide receiver. He went for almost 1,000 yards. But Holmes is going to move into that number 1 spot, and this Troy offense, they're going to score points. Like, Vegas loves them. I like them personally. I'm not sure how good UAB's defense is going to be, but I think Holmes is going to be probably the highest scoring fantasy total from that game.
Mm-hmm.
So I have him locked in, especially at 5,100 on FanDuel. That's really cheap for a number 1 option.
Yeah, it's a really good find there, Jordan. I looked for guys in this slate that I liked, and he would actually fit the bill as a good play. It looked like he disappeared a couple in some blowouts, but definitely a good play in this game, probably.
Yeah. All right. Are there any California wide receivers that you guys like? See, the thing with Cal is Jared Goff is so bad, but they have to throw a ton. So do any of them snag a TD? Do any of them do anything?
Are they actually good, Ben? Like, from the Guru, are they good? Treggs and Harper for Cal, are they good players, actually? Or
Harper's good. Harper's really good.
Harper actually is really good.
Because I know they both put up a lot of stats, but that's because they throw the ball 7,000 times a game.
Yeah, they're 8 deep in their wide receivers, and they brag about it, too. So they are very happy going with him or any other of their 6 wide receivers they're lucky to have. They have Kenny Lawler, who's really good, big guy, can catch touchdowns. But Chris Harper's the best talent. If you're gonna get in this game and you want to do Jared Goff, then and you want to put somebody with him, it's got to be Chris Harper.
Yeah, it's definitely Harper. So the thing with them is they also used to have Richard Rodgers at tight end, who really was not very good, but got drafted in the 3rd round, which I always found to be kind of hilarious that the Packers took him there. Outside of that, though, I don't know. Are there any other wide receivers we need to talk about? I mean, do you have any love for Kenny Bell of Nebraska in a cupcake matchup?
Are we still in the early slate?
We're bouncing around now.
Well, I mean, there's a ton on, like you said, wide receiver there's a lot of different options. If you're looking at the late slate, we've really hit on Tommy Schuler. There's a Tommy Schuler on the late slate, in my opinion. That's Nelson Aguilar, who may not get. Oh,
there's a hot take. Hit me with your Nelson Aguilar hot take.
You don't need a hot take. There's Marquise Lee's gone. It's the Aguilar show. Kessler threw for 4 touchdowns last year. He's gonna throw again. Aguilar, the George Farmer, who's minimum play on both FanDuel and DraftKings, but although he's a running back on FanDuel, he's a good play. He's the number 2 wide receiver that they're going with, 5-star recruit. But Aguilar is the guy to own. He's a stud. There were a couple games last year where he won me lots of money. Looked great against Fresno last year. He's the man. Yep. Tyler Lockett, if you go Tyler Lockett in that late slate, that's another one where you're taking a big risk.
I would not take Tyler Lockett.
But here's the thing though, Davis. He is the focal point of that offense. You know that.
He's the only part of that offense.
I saw him on campus the other day.
You boys are Kansas State boys, so you know that Tyler Lockett is
Jordan's not really a Kansas State boy. He still gets lost going to class in the morning.
Hey, I haven't ended up in a forest yet, Davis.
Yeah, did I ever tell that story on air? First day on campus here at K-State, literally got lost in a forest on campus, did not know where I was just in the middle of a bunch of trees. Scariest moment of my life. Thought I was going to die. But I don't know. Tyler Lockett is the definition of a GPP play to me.
Yeah, I can get with that. He's really expensive. 6,400 on DraftKings is really expensive. If you didn't know, it's still kind of cheap.
Yeah,
I think I found another gem on DraftKings when I was doing my research. Corey Davis for Western Michigan. They're up against Purdue. He's only 4,700, and I don't know what that offense is going to do this year. They were pretty balanced last year, weren't they? Western Michigan.
Yeah, Corey Davis is a good. I wrote him up too.
Oh no, I thought it was Central Michigan is where Zerlin Tipton came from. Never mind.
You might also be thinking of Titus Davis, who plays for Central Michigan and is also his brother of Corey Davis.
Hurt. He broke his leg or something, didn't he?
Yeah, he got hurt.
Yeah, but Corey Davis is the guy we're talking about. He's a good player. He really is, Jordan. He's solid. The tough part is, yeah, he's cheap. It's figuring out how bad they're gonna, how much they're gonna throw against Purdue. I wrote up that I think that they're gonna be playing from behind, so that boosts Corey Davis's value because they're gonna have to throw.
I like him a lot.
So at 4,700 on DraftKings and 5,100 on FanDuel, he's a good play.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the late slate, sort of. I think the way to play the late slate on FanDuel is to take someone maybe like Dak Prescott at quarterback, maybe even someone a little bit lower than that, maybe one of the I don't know. I don't know who I like at quarterback in the late slate, but I don't think I'm paying up for Jameis Winston. I think in college football it's sort of a mistake to pay up for a passing quarterback that doesn't have any rushing upside. Do you agree, Ben?
Yeah, it's a tough slate for quarterbacks. If you're not Dak Prescott's the man. I have a lot of love for that guy. He's a really good quarterback. He can throw enough and he can run. I compared him to Tim Tebow, and that's who he is. He's a Tim Tebow-like passer, except he actually has a better completion percentage. So he's a really good play. He's a bulldozer. He scores touchdowns on the ground. He can throw for touchdowns. Has good receiving options. He has a big receiver. He has a little receiver. Jamion Lewis and De'Runnya Wilson. De'Runnya Wilson's the big guy. I like Wilson a little bit more if you're going to pair them together. You have Davis Webb, who's playing Central Arkansas. You know how they love to throw the ball all over the place with Texas Tech. So that's a good option. There's a lot of really the same kind of options. If you're going on FanDuel, the options there are more like cheaper. David Ash and Jeff Driscoll are the two guys I really like on FanDuel.
The reason that I started making that point was not to talk more about quarterbacks, but was to say I think the way to play that slate is to capture the upside that Jameis Winston does have by taking Rashad Green at wide receiver. I think if you want some exposure to Florida State against Oklahoma State, your way of doing that is to take Rashad Green. And the reason that I say that is, if you go back and look at the game logs last year, Rashad Green was the one putting up the monster stats until the emergence of Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin's not there anymore. And Rashad Green's a pretty unique player in a couple ways. He can do a lot of damage on screens and over the middle of the field, but he's also big enough and strong enough to make a difference in the red zone. So as long as Nick O'Leary isn't stealing the red zone touchdowns, I actually think there's a lot of upside for Rashad Green that's not in his price tag right now.
I think I agree with that.
I like him more than Nelson Aguilar, Ben. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Whoa, you're way wrong. The matchup isn't as good. Jameis Winston has tons of options. They have good corners at Oklahoma State. It's a risk.
Nobody in the Big 12 plays defense, though, man.
No, I'm not saying he's not going to have a huge game. There's going to be points scored by Florida State in that, and they're going to win. They're probably going to win by 3 touchdowns. It's just one of those ones where I wouldn't really dabble with it. I didn't even write up Jameis Winston either. I didn't write up Jameis Winston or Rashad Green for that same purpose. You can't really nail how it's going to happen. Although I do love Jameis Winston.
All right.
I think with wide receiver personally, you got to get some of these cheap options. Devin Kajusti. For Stanford, number 2, big body wide receiver, minimum price.
Ty Montgomery, though.
Ty Montgomery is dealing with an injury. They don't even know how much he's going to play. So they're playing UC Davis. So they got to have another wide receiver option. And Kajusi had some big games, 22.9 yards per catch too. So he's really good. I also really like the other guys below him, except for Corey Robinson. I really like Mike Williams and Brian Underwood. Underwood facing Georgia Southern for NC State. and Brissett. If anybody decides to go that Brissett route, which I think is really popular in the Twitter world, people keep talking about how that's who they're using in daily. I get it, but I'm not necessarily going to do it. Brian Underwood's the guy you want to pair. He's the number one. But Mike Williams for Clemson against Georgia.
Mike Williams, every wide receiver by the name of Mike Williams has been amazing in college.
He is the guy that's going to sneak through the cracks because they're probably going to be playing from behind. Georgia's defense is good. It's fully intact from last year for the most part. They're going to totally demolish Clemson. But Mike Williams has to replace Martavis Bryant and Sammy Watkins. So look for him to get a lot of targets. He's going to be the guy.
Who is their QB now?
It's Cole Stout.
Is he good?
I mean, he did pretty good when he was filling in last year. He 415 yards and 5 touchdowns filling in for
Taj Boyd.
For Taj. The big game he had was against South Carolina State when he threw for 3 touchdowns, 143 yards, 19 for 20 in that game. But that was a FCS team. There's really nothing we have to go off of to say if he's going to be good
or bad. Yeah. I know that one of Jordan and I's favorites is Jamie and Lewis. You want to talk a little bit about Jamie and Lewis, Jordan?
Yeah, he is, like Ben said, he's a smaller wide receiver for Mississippi State. He's obviously got a good quarterback throwing to him. They're really heavily favored. But he also has been known to drop back, or not really drop back, but to throw a pass or two. Yeah, last year, he threw a couple touchdowns last year, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and I also think he ran a little bit.
Yeah, he does everything. He's like a utility guy for them, and he's just always on the field. Because of that, he has a somewhat high floor. He has a really high ceiling.
Yeah,
his price is kind of high on FanDuel, but I don't know. I like him.
Yeah, they work him out of the slot a lot, and they use De'Runnya Wilson to stretch the field to go for that big play. But Jamie Lewis is probably their most seasoned veteran, their best wide receiver in that regards, but De'Runnya Wilson's their most talented wide receiver, in my opinion.
Jamie Lewis is their Brandon Cooks. He's a poor man's Brandon Cooks.
Oh my gosh! Wow, you've been hanging out with Davis way too long, man.
I said poor man's.
Well, you better be dirt poor, man. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, such a hot take. Okay, we got 10 minutes left. Let's just roll through some tight ends. So I know you're gonna disagree with me on this, but I think the play in the late slate on FanDuel, or if you're playing all day, or even on DK,
they don't have an all day slate.
Yeah,
no, you can post head to head.
Oh, okay, because I didn't see any posted all day.
They have one GPP in the $5 range as well for all day.
Yeah. But I think Blake Bell is a super excellent play. Not because I think he has a lot of upside in the receiving game, but there's still, like, early reports, all the reports out of Oklahoma have been that they're still going to run the Belldozer package. So if you can play a tight end that you know has a very good chance at goal line carries, specifically designed to score him fantasy points, why wouldn't you? For 4,300, I know that seems like a lot, but tell me, Ben, why I should fade him.
I'm not saying you should fade him. He made my ranks, so he's definitely not one you should have to think about fading. He's not necessarily the top one off the board because Trevor Knight can run the ball, so it's not like they have to go with Bell at the 1 yard line. So there's some question as to whether they're even going to use that package. I know you said you've read that, but I've also read that that he's fully entrenched as the quarterback and that they're not even using him as the tight end. They're not even using him as quarterback anymore. But I mean, he might get that Belldozer package. I hope he does because I'm thinking about rostering him myself. But you can get for 600 more. You can get O'Leary from Florida State. I mean, there's other options. I would go cheaper though. I would go with Malcolm Johnson from Mississippi State or Eric Tomlinson from UTEP in that late slate.
Here's the thing. Here's the question that I would pose to you. So what you're doing when you're taking a punt tight end, or really any tight end, because almost no tight end in college not named Jay Samaro, and he's not around anymore, really just plays to be a red zone option. More or less true, Ben?
More or less true.
Yeah, so you're trying to get a touchdown. So I think Blake Bell gives the best chance of getting a touchdown. Because he is going to play as a pass catcher, and if they run the Belldozer, he scored 25 touchdowns in 2 seasons doing that.
He has to be good at it because they gave him that task at the end of last season, and he took it, ran with it, and is now the starting tight end. So he must be showing something in practice that says, hey, I'm awesome. I deserve to be here. I deserve to be the starting tight end. And so, yeah, there's a valid point to that, Davis. He has a really good shot at touchdown.
Yeah. All right, Jordan, give me some punt tight ends.
My punt tight end on the early slate, I really like Tommy Blevins from Troy. I don't know a whole lot about him. I don't know if there's much that's been revealed about him. But like that game is a high over/under. He's listed as the number 1 tight end on their depth chart. He is 6'4" and like 240 pounds. He's a huge dude. And, I mean, I want exposure to that game as much as I possibly can. And if I can get my punt tight end out of that, who is listed as the number 1 option at that position, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. All right, Ben, do you have any cheap tight ends?
I don't think you should punt. I mean, not to differ from Jordan at all, but, I mean, that's a good option. But when it comes to actually playing the position on either slate, I don't think you need to punt it. I think you need to be spending a little bit. Like David said, getting Blake Bell. On the early slate, it's getting Connor Hamlet or E.J. Bibbs, or even going for Gator Hoskins replacement, front awful. Ben Koyak at tight end U, Notre Dame. He's taken over that job that was, Eifert and, who all else have they had there? It's just like a ton of awesome NFL tight ends have come out of Notre Dame. So
before Eifert, it was not Ertz. Ertz was whoever played before him also got drafted.
Yeah, I mean, every single one they've had for the past decade has been drafted in the first 2 rounds. It's like something crazy like that. Yeah. So if Koyak's taking over that position, you got Golson back under center. He's looking for that safety valve. Koyak, boom, you got a cheap play. He's only 3,500 on FanDuel, so he's only 500 more than the minimum. That's where I would go.
Kyle Rudolph is who I was thinking of. He was the one before him who went really early.
Again, another really good tight end. They just put him out, man.
All right, a punt tight end. I like Justin Sins for 3,100 on FanDuel. For like Big Ten schools use the tight end more than other schools. It seems to be. I don't know. That's obviously super anecdotal. But Sins had some decent games last year. For Northwest, Dan Vitale. He's incredibly expensive, but he was also a big part of their offense last year. I'm probably not using him, but if you need that safety, am I missing anyone, Ben?
I would just be careful with Sins because they have Gabe Holmes back, who's another big tight end for Purdue, and they'll be going back and forth on who's getting the.
Isn't Vitale like the number 1 passing option in that offense?
Vitale, if you go that direction, he's very risky. I can't remember very many times last year where he was worth anything.
Yeah, that is true. It's just because Northwestern is so ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Guys, I think that's it. Is there anything else we need to tell everybody? My laptop, I didn't bring my charger, and I've only got like 13 minutes left of battery.
No, I think we covered a lot of what I wanted to cover on here. So, guys, have a good time. I look forward to seeing y'all again next week for sure.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, it's going to get a little bit easier as it goes through. I mean, you're seeing this, even the 3 of us who played all last year and everything. Even there's some stuff we just can't know. We can't know until we see guys out there and get in roles. No matter how much research you do, it's really hard to predict, and maybe the coaches don't even know. There's a real chance that the coaches don't know how they're going to use their players come tomorrow, like coming to a running back rotation. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be fun.
Awesome.
And Al Smizzle, you get out of here. You get out of here, Smiz.
What's he saying?
He's saying I need to check the tape. Here's the thing. I could determine the same thing by looking at a game log. So, all right. Well, I think that'll do it for us here at Fantasy Insiders TV. One parting word.
Play Raheem Cato.
Play Raheem Cato.
That's like 3 words.
Whatever.
It needs to be said though.
It does.
Everyone out there, Fantasy Insiders, the The Fantasy Show, sponsored by FantasyElite, the app that you can buy on the App Store. Everyone, farewell, good night, win some monies in the morning.
Well,